What is going on, guys? Thank you for stepping into the chamber once again. Today we're going to be looking at a meta powerhouse in the form of Invoker. Invoker is a deck that has been running around the game since it was introduced back in set 9. And it's a very skill-intensive deck that is great for any player who thinks they can leverage their skill over their opponent. Before we get started, we're going to be doing things just a little bit differently today, and we're going to focus a bit less on like what the card effects actually do, because those are going to be available in our sidebar. That's going to be right over here once we begin. And instead, we're just going to talk a little bit more about why things are included. But before we get to the deck, we're going to go over the leader first. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so leader's front. He has an activate battle that basically lets you combo with an extra card once per turn, or sorry, once per battle. And if you combo with that extra card as a 5k, you then get to draw a card. This is really important in this deck because almost half, a little bit more than half the deck is extra cards. We use way more extra cards than a lot of other decks. So being able to turn them into combo power, or at least a little bit of combo power, just helps us stay alive. This deck is not a deck for players who are afraid to go to life totals, low life totals, because sometimes you'll stabilize with this leader at like 1 or 2 lives remaining. It can be very, you can get very close to death without actually dying. Anyways, when you combo with an extra card, you also get the opportunity to take a life, which you'll almost never do because you're usually going to be the defensive player in most of your matchups. He uses Surge Awaken, so it's pretty standard. You know, 1 red card, 1 blue card, draw 3, untap 1. Awakens into Ultra Instinct Son Goku, limits surpassed. So, a couple things to unpack here. His first ability to add back any 3 different multicolors has a ton of flexibility. We run a variety of different multicolor cards, and it's great if you desperately need something to out a certain situation. But ideally, you're going to want to use his second ability, which requires you to have a U7, and it gives you a hand rip for any like non-unison, non-SCR, effectively. Both of the win conditions in Invoker are kind of all or nothing. Like if your opponent has a way to disrupt it, it can quickly turn very sideways for you. So the leader's ability to like peek at the opponent's hand and take out, you know, whatever their safety line is really important. And if you can make it to just before the turn you awaken, what you can do, because this ability on his awaken side is a activate mana battle, you can awaken, rip something out of your opponent's hand on your opponent's turn, and then when it cycles back around to your turn, you can rip a second time to remove basically 2 layers of defense, which is usually the most that your opponent's going to have. With that out of the way, let's move on to the actual deck. First, we run a playset of Top, Tournament of Power Arena. We're going to refer to as Top. Top is probably the most important card in the deck, since it allows us to see practically our entire deck most games. And make certain effects that we have far more consistent. In addition to the fact that we don't have to care about energy exhaust is like a big perk to playing Invoker over other multicolor decks, because we never have to like waste a turn playing a multicolor energy and rest mode because of this card. Generally, you should mulligan for it extremely aggressively. It's probably the most important card to open with. Next, we're going to talk about the actual Invoker in the deck and where the deck gets its namesake, which is this guy right here. We run 3 copies of Vegeta Inspired Technique. Vegeta is kind of boring and yet really important. He's a 19k beater, but you'll rarely swing with him because it exposes him to attacks. He has barrier and deflect, so your opponent has very few ways that they can actually interact with this card. And then he has Invoker. Invoker basically means that you can pay for any red-blue multicolor extra card by using 1 red-blue multicolor energy instead of whatever its energy cost would normally be, for those of you who aren't familiar. There's not a lot to say about this guy, other than that you kind of want to just cast him ideally on 3, maybe 4, depending on like what else is in your hand, and then sit on him. As a note, against green players that are sitting with a Demigra out, he can be killed by Demigra's -3, and as an extension of that, you usually can't safely play this guy against green players that have a Demigra out. and you'll have to make do without it, which is a thing that you can do. Actually, most of the cards in this are playable without having the Invoker out. They just get much better if you have access to the Invoker trigger. Next, let's talk about our red-blue multicolor extra cards. We run 4 copies of Royal Condemnation. Condemnation is our counterplay, being able to hit almost any battle card, including most SCRs. Helps keep us safe against big threats we don't want to touch down. 4 energy is like super expensive, so you rarely use this card unless you have an Invoker out. But this card is also important to run as a playset because of its second ability, the Activate Main, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Next, we run 4 copies of Catastrophic Blow. Cat Blow on its own is really tame. It's 5 energy to do a damage, as long as you control either a Son Goku or no battle cards. But Cat Blow is our primary win condition. At least in most matchups, it's our primary win condition. And we'll explain the Cat Blow loop in detail later on, since there's a lot to unpack here. Next, we also run 4 copies of Emperor's Death Beam. Death Beam allows you to fry a battle card ignoring barrier in combat as an Activate Main or battle. And it makes it borderline impossible for your opponent to go in on you with any battle card unless they're desperate, because the risk of you just killing in combat and nuking all their combo power is way too high. Now, all of these cards that I've gone over so far, Death Beam, Condemnation, and Cat Blow, also have a extra Activate Main, and the Activate Main is the same on all 3 of them. And it says that you can check the top card of your deck and reveal it, and if it's a red-blue multicolor extra card, you get to add it to your hand. In conjunction with Tournament of Power Arena and the ability to manipulate the top cards, and our leader's ability to cycle these as combo power, these cards you can combo them away and draw a card, and then warp them later to draw extra cards thanks to top, making that effect guaranteed. And then we have a couple of ways, including the leader's awakened ability, to get these warped cards back. How you use this core package here is one of the biggest things about being successful with Invoker. You're constantly having to make decisions about when do you use this effect, when do you fire it blind, when do you use top to actually check things, along with top's ability to help make these effects consistent. There's just a lot that's very circumstantial with this deck that's a little hard to capture in our profile. This is not a deck you can pick up and play with just a few games and really perform well. Now onto the rest of our multicolors. We run 2 copies of Sleepy Boy Technique. This card is nuts if your opponent has a good target for it to bounce in addition to the negate, and if you have an Invoker out. If you don't have an Invoker, Sleepy Boy Technique is like almost an unresolvable counter for what it does. So because of that and the fact that we can kind of fetch and recycle it, we simply run just 2 copies. Even though when this card is live, it's incredible. Next, we run 2 copies of Inspired Technique. Inspired Technique is a somewhat energy efficient negate that's kind of a soft turn stop due to its ability to shrink multiple cards along with, in theory, our opponent's leader as well. So you can get a few effective negates out of this card. So it's a good soft turn stop that we can then grab back with a couple of our card effects, including, again, our leader's awakened ability. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot to unpack here. Next, we run 2 copies of Combination Attack. Combination Attack is a energy efficient way to stop certain swings from battle cards mid-combat without needing an Invoker, since Death Beam costs 3 and this card costs 2 and untaps 1. It's also free, effectively, if we have an Invoker, due to its untap effect. Some matchups you can pull this card out because it's not very good, but there are matchups where this card is a game winner. And finally, for our red-blue multicolor extra cards, we also run 1 copy of We're in This Together. We're in This Together is a board wipe, which is useful, but it's also a card we can buy back directly from the drop area with a 1 red energy, which is useful against hand control decks or any decks where we have kind of like the luxury to use this, or if we combo it away with our leader's ability on his front side. And then we desperately need to get it out later in the game to wipe a board. You can pay a red and grab it, and then you can, with an Invoker, you can pay 1 and wipe your opponent's board. It's a nice little one-of. Into our other extra cards, we run 4 copies of Sensu Bean. Sensu Bean is one of the best cards in this deck, and it really overperforms in this deck compared to a lot of other decks that can run Sensu Bean. There's a few reasons for that. The first is the fact that our leader is kind of a soft 15k on his front side due to his ability to, once per battle, combo an extra card and go up to 15. So if you use a Sensu Bean to put him at 15, now he's effectively just a very easy 20, which a lot of swings can't, you can't meaningfully threaten that with a 20k leader without putting some serious investment into those attacks. In addition, this deck typically will charge a blue energy ideally on its first turn, and then red-blue on every turn after that. And we use our red-blues to pay for our Invoker triggers and other card effects. So you'll often have 1 blue energy, like a mono blue that you charged on turn 1, just kind of sitting around. You can tap that energy with Sensu Bean, and then Sensu Bean's untap, you can untap 2 multicolors. So Sensu Bean can also be used to effectively buy you 2 more Invoker triggers. So it's just an all-performer both defensively and I guess in terms of more of utility sense to access extra Invoker cards. Extra cards that you need to invoke out. It's just really, really good in this deck. In the same token, we run a playset of Dimension Magic. Dimension Magic as a negate, you can do the same thing. You can use your 1 blue energy and rest it, untap 2 multicolors. Its sparking ability is also trivially easy to activate in this deck because of how often our leader is putting cards into our drop area. Not a whole lot to say about this card. It's just an all-rounder. One of the best negates in the deck. For our hard turn stops, we run 3 copies of Violent Rays. This deck list is at 50, and I might bump this to 51 to add a 4th copy of Rays, but for now we're at 50 and 3. Rays is just a red staple to stop any 20k or higher, which again in this deck is really brutal because we can also put our leader at 20, so our opponent's going to be a very, shall we say, disincentivized to attack us through this effect. The discard effect is relatively trivial because we can pitch extra cards and then warp them and draw more cards afterwards, so we can kind of trivialize the downsides of this card. It's just a great all-around turn stopper. Getting into our red-blue multicolor battle cards, we run a playset of Son Goku Rival Seeker. Rival Seeker is a great card for a couple of reasons. First, because of his permanent, he's effectively a 0 plus 10k, meaning he's just free combo power on a stick. So it's almost like running 8 super combos in this deck, except he doesn't draw. He also has an activate main, where once he's out, you can add 2 warped red-blue multicolors from your warp to your hand, and then optionally, you can play a Son Goku that costs 6 on top of him. It's important to note that you don't need to play the 6-drop, so on games where you just really need to access warped extra cards, you can just hardcast this guy like on turn 4, and then just add 2 and not evolve him up. Really, really, really cool, good card, easy 4-of. Onto our target, we run 2 copies of Ultra Instinct Son Goku Energy Explosion. So Energy Explosion has a complicated pseudo untapped 3 effect on him when he gets played, and once per turn when we deal a damage, he himself will then deal a damage to our opponent. So this gets into our how we actually kill our opponent in this deck. This is like our alternate win condition with Cap Blow, and we're going to briefly explain this. If you already know how this engine works, then you can simply skip ahead. So let's imagine it's turn 5, so we have 5 total energy, and we have a Rival Seeker, 1 Energy Explosion, and 2 Cap Blows. On turn 5, you can pay 3 energy for our Goku, and assuming you also have a Vegeta for an Invoker, then you can use energy 4 and energy 5 for 2 Cap Blows. That's 2 damage. You can then warp these Cap Blows with their own abilities to optionally, maybe if you're lucky, hit cards. Doesn't really matter. Then you use his other ability to add these warped Cap Blows back to your hand and play out the Energy Explosion on top. Energy Explosion will untap 3 of your energy by dropping them into the drop and then replacing them. And now you've got 2 more cap blow. You energy for 2 more cap blows. That's 4 damage. And this guy right here will pump it up to 5. Thanks to his auto for whenever you deal the damage. That's 5. If you have an extra cap blow, you can make it 6. If you also have a card left underneath your leader, you can go up to 7. It's very easy to do 6, 7 burn damage in total. Plus, energy explosion itself is a 35k beater. So your opponent might be disincentivized to combo out of this. So you can use this to also force, an extra piece of damage on your opponent. But this is our burn out. Now that's been explained, let's keep going back with the profile. We also have 2 copies of Cooler, Tyrannical Assault. This guy arrivals off of our super combo, which, spoilers, we run a playset of Beerus. He's a 20k double strike, and we usually won't use this to attack our opponent's leader because we don't want to give them cards. Since we largely don't care about their life total, we just care about ours. But we can use him to trim our opponent's battle cards. With his on-play auto, you can use him to attack unisons. His double strike taking multiple markers is nice. You can use his effect to, drop threats, and then on your next turn you can swing into them and remove them. He's just a utility card. Into our super combos and SCR. For our super combo, we run a playset of Beerus, Divine Obliterator. Beerus untaps one of our multicolor energies when we combo with him, on top of being combo power on a stick. He's just energy untap, whenever you need it, which you can then use to go into like a Sensu Bean for more energy. Or you can just, once you have an Invoker out, you can use this to activate a single, any red, blue, multicolor extra card. It's just a great unison. I sometimes think about going with 3 Beerus and 1 Edge of Space to grab back cards on our energy that we don't need, or maybe swap out a blue energy for another multicolor. That's a thing I might mess around with, but for now, I'm just on a set of these. Real easy choice. And into the SCR for the deck. Apex of Power. There's not a whole lot to say about Apex. It's 5 energy. You need 5 red blue multicolors in your drop area to play it. It's pretty easy in this deck. It blanks everything your opponent controls in all areas except for their extra cards. And he has Death Touch to players because he has Victory Strike. 45 is pretty big, and we have a good grip of 10Ks that don't require energy, super combos, and our Rival Seekers. So this can easily be a 65, 75k swing without too much effort. And if it does damage to our opponent, they die. And even if, they survive that swing on the next turn, all their card effects are blinked, and then you can just hit them with it a second time, and they'll probably die then. Not a whole lot to say about this card. It's really expensive. It's really good in a lot of matchups. You kind of needed to play this deck. So that concludes our Invoker deck profile, and hopefully you have a slightly better understanding of how to play with Invoker. Before we end our video today, we're going to spend a little bit and talk about what you can do to fight against this leader. And there's a few things you can do. The first thing you need to understand is that this leader, this 10k here, this is a lie. His activate battle means that in basically all circumstances, he's actually 15, and with a Sensu Bean, he can go up to 20 pretty easily. You need every swing you make against this guy to count. What you don't want to do is throw a couple random like 10Ks or 15s if your opponent's got a Sensu Bean effect on, active, because those swings are not only not going to do anything because they can easily combo out through the leader's ability, but you're actually going to then just push them deeper into their deck. Invoker basically never fails to find their win condition because of Tournament of Power Arena, so you can't afford to just kind of like take your time and hope they don't have it, because they always have it. This card right here, Tournament of Power, they get to see practically their entire deck if they want to, between that and their ability to keep ripping extra cards at the top of their deck. They're gonna have the SCR. They're gonna have the Rival Seeker Cat Blow combo. Whatever kill they want for you, they're gonna have. So the biggest tip you have against Invoker is to get aggressive. Next, and this is more of a general one about as an extension of getting aggressive, is be mindful of what you're trying to put damage through. If you're swinging with some like random 5-drop, not only can they death beam it, but they can also combo attack it. both of these are outs to battle card swings, and you don't want that to happen. So if your battle card has, 5 energy or less, you only combo the bare minimum. Even if it's like a double or a triple strike, the Death Beam can drop it dead. Now, as a note, there are some cards that don't add combo power, but instead increase the power of your battle card directly. Negative energy balls, for example, a lot of the iconic attack rares, things like that. You can use those to put yourself out of range of Death Beam, or at least a single Death Beam. Granted, Death Beam is still a minus 30k, but if you're swinging with some like big beefy threat and then you pump its power to high heaven, the 30k probably won't be enough. And that's a good way to get through a lot of the defenses that Invoker has. The other thing to be mindful of Invoker is managing their Awakened side. Specifically their hand rip. They get to look at your hand and they can take anything that's not an SCR and extra card out of it. So extra cards are a good way to kind of like help keep yourself safe. Sorry, correction. Any non-SCR, non-unison. Sorry, their hand rip can't take extra cards. I'm thinking of the SCR. This, you can use extra cards to out, but the leader can take extra cards. So a good way to not die to this is to hold like 2 negates. Like if you're playing green, hold on to 2 copies of Shocking Death Ball. So that way when they rip your hand, there's only one, they can only take 1 Death Ball and you still have a Death Ball left for this guy. You can't rely on battle cards. You can't rely on anything else because the leader blanks all that. Even if your leader has some kind of like, like if you're playing like Surge Broly, for example, in theory, and you can kill it in battle, it doesn't matter. This leader blanks that. You don't get leader effects. So holding on to duplicates with this is a great way to play around it. The only catch there is that your opponent can double rip, and that's the thing you just have to hope that they don't do. If you can find a way to force them to grab extra cards because they're in a pinch, you can then hold on to your 2 extras and they'll only have 1 use of this leader's ability left to rip 1 card out. The bottom line is a lot of stuff with Invoker is very board state dependent, matchup dependent, and it's not a matchup that you can easily understand and win with just like a game or two. There's a lot of moving pieces. They have a lot of like in combat tricks, turn slams. That's why despite being only a set 9 deck, it's still a very good leader. But hopefully you have a better understanding of how to play against Invoker. Thanks for checking out our profile, and we're going to see you guys in the next one. Once again, thanks for entering the chamber.